Thank you for tuning in. This video is going to be slightly different from my other content out there. Basically, I'm going to be covering falling back on my financial background, looking at things that can indicate a recession is coming, and also some cryptocurrency aspects. Again, this is not financial or legal advice. It's for more entertainment purposes, almost educational purposes. But again, you pay for what you get sometimes. Now, I was previously watching a Jim Rickards video, and as I was watching that, I thought I would try and take some notes to get a better understanding of what is currently happening in the world. Now, it's going to be only so deep because there are many things that make up one person's, if they're trying to pick a stock or you're trying to do an analysis, how much data do you take into account? Well, like I said, I'll focus in on recession and also cryptocurrency. Now, the wilderness of mirrors, the organizational culture of the secret services in its deceptions are false, lies are truth, and yeah, you can imagine merely what that means. So I heard that saying from Jim Rickards, so I thought I would open with that because that is very interesting. Look into that, people. We have here, basically, as I was trying to explain before without rambling on too much, a complex system analysis. Now, this is relatively new. I hadn't come across it, although I think I had been practicing it for quite some time without knowing it. Quite often when you do some research, you might go off and have a look at some papers and you try and take into account all the information points and tie it all together with your argument, or your research, your findings in some cases. So what is a complex system? The best way to explain it is when a whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Now that is very interesting. It's a very simple idea, and if you can understand that, then it might help when trying to digest large portions of information. At times can be difficult. Now basically, I'm going to be reading off some notes here that I hand wrote. Very technical stuff, very high tech. Now, after considering a complex system, what could you mean by that? Well, if you look at, say, something as simple as a bank account, money comes in, assuming one source of income, that's it. But a more complex system could be, how the person or entity is earning their money and factors that could then affect their ability to earn money, the market that could affect it, that they're participating in, and then there's many more levels. How deep do you want to go? How much of that is useful? How much are you able to actually analyze? That's probably a very simple example of that. Again, it can be as simple as one bank account, or it could be the entire economy. Now, one would assume the entire economy is probably a complex system. You would subject it to complex system analysis. So from here, I think the best part, I'll go basically off my notes here. When trying to understand a recession, what are some factors you might want to consider? There's the type of assets that that exist in an economy that you're analyzing as part of a complex system. You have what is called a risk on and risk off asset. Now, I wrote some simple notes. I'll put a link in the description below. Basically, you've got risk off assets are things such as cash, the US dollar, some other foreign currencies, bonds, treasury bills. Basically, if you summarize them, they're basically low yield. And the risk on assets are things like stonks. I should have said stocks or equities, but I'll just use stonks. Leverage trading options, things like that, derivatives, and crypto. Usually they're higher yield. Basically, risk off meaning you don't want to have much risk. Risk on meaning you're basically in some cases gambling. I shouldn't laugh because sometimes you never know. You never know. Imagine the speculation stock, for example. Penny stocks or whatever, it might go to $1 and you might have invested a little bit of money in it and now you're a bit richer. That would be a risk on asset. And the next thing, when you're taking part in this game, you basically want to be able to pay back your, I can't even read what I'm writing. You want the asset to be able to pay you back. So say you took out a loan, you're basically looking for an instrument, an asset that can pay that money back to you once, twice, you basically want it to pay you back. Simple as that. If you didn't have any loan to start off with and you're investing in something, basically anything above that amount is what? Pure gain, pure income, whatever you might be looking at. So that's a very good place to start when you're thinking about what am I looking for with a risk on asset. Am I going for low yield, high yield? The ability to pay you back. Oh, there's so much stuff I want to say here, but I won't. I'm going to keep it simple. You have then an indicator as to whether or not a inverted yield curve is present. And when I heard this, I was trying to I was trying to figure out, what does an inverted yield curve look like? What does it mean? So you can imagine here, inverted yield curve. It's a bit extreme, but basically a normal yield curve, well, semi-normal. If you break it down into, bond length, the 30, 60, 90, 120, 180, 3, 4, or 5 years. I think maybe out to 10 years. Not including HEX at this point. But in regards to bonds, you have, time and the interest rate. So a normal yield curve, generally you would see an increasing up and to the right. Lower yields to start off with and higher yields later on, although this graph is probably not the best example because it's sort of very extreme. Up and to the right. The rates might not be that much greater in the 10-year bond market, but it's usually more than what it would be for 30-day in the money market. So taking that into account, someone mentioned quite often leading up to a recession, things take place in a complex system which indicate that a recession could be coming. Now, I mapped this one out simply and tried to figure out what an inverted yield curve looks like, and you can see that's the one that starts higher and sort of tapers off in this particular graph. And what does that mean? Well, I thought, well, okay, I'll break it down. What's currently happening in our economy? A part of it is a liquidity crisis, whereby, say you go bankrupt because you don't have access to funds or something that can be converted into funds. You have low liquidity, low cash reserves, or something like that. You look at your books, basically, how you're going. Again, could be for a business or it could be for the entire economy. Moving on to the entire economy, we're seeing what? Interest rates increasing. We're seeing prices increase, and we are seeing the dollar rate increase. So if you're looking at the US dollar relative to, say, the Australian, the Aussie, then US dollar's up, Australian's down. At the same time, we are seeing risk on assets decreasing. So the equity market is basically a little bit lower. As the rates increase, stocks tend to drop off. Mind you, this is not taking into account quantitative easing or quantitative tightening in its sort of as the lead indicator. Basically, all I'm saying is at the moment, these are going up, these are going down. Now, if we were to map the interest rates out on a graph, we could see because the interest rates are increasing over time, if there were to be a decrease in the future, well, then in theory, you might see an inverted yield curve, which could be bad because that would indicate a recession could be coming. And in the future, if you think about how the monetary policy will move, they will increase until they don't, or until they decrease. If at some point they don't increase or they decrease, then you will see prices decrease, the US dollar rate decrease, you will see rates decrease as well, and you will also see risk on assets increase. So stocks might start to pump again, crypto might start to pump again. Again, lots of stuff I want to say here, but I won't. I'll let you figure that out. Now, during this, you have, as I said before, the liquidity crisis. Companies may have low cash reserves. They may find it harder to access credit. A vicious cycle, and you end up with a liquidity crisis. Now, I will actually stop here and explain deflation. Basically, deflation is what I predict will happen. I think even Richard Hart himself said it might go the other way. Jim Rickards, I think he said deflation is probably coming. But if you look at the inverted yield curve, then is most likely deflation will trigger this inverted yield curve to occur. So we'll play this here.
The prices of goods and services go down. We have deflation. Lower prices may seem like a blessing, but deflation is actually a curse because it generates a vicious circle. If prices go down, the profits of businesses tend to go down with them, and the economy suffers. A lot of people therefore either lose their jobs or have to accept lower wages. And what do people do when they have less money? They consume less. What happens if people consume less? There's less demand for goods and services. And what's the consequence of reduced demand? You've guessed it, an even bigger deflation problem. But can't those who haven't lost their jobs or had a decrease in income spend more to compensate? Well, they could, but that's probably not going to happen. Why? For the simple reason that seeing your neighbor face financial difficulties makes you more pessimistic as well, and therefore, even those who haven't yet suffered income or job loss will become more cautious and consume less. There you have it. Vicious Circles 101.
So that is deflation. Basically, should the Fed lower rates continuously month after month, it might trigger this deflation after increasing, which will be a very interesting position to be in because, I'm not going to drill too much deeper into that. You could then go into how money is created, how the IMF is involved, but yeah, I won't. I'll leave that for you. The next thing I guess I would touch on is, as I mentioned before, the liquidity crisis and how that might play into everything I've said. So I'll play that through, let you watch that. Then I'll touch on what a solution could be, All right, here we go. I'll play this one.
The two terms are similar, but not identical. Liquidity crunch is the broader term, and as the name suggests, it describes a situation in which cash and cash equivalents are hard to come by. Also called a liquidity crisis or a liquidity squeeze, it can affect anything from an individual business that is forced to declare bankruptcy due to not having enough short-term liquidity to meet its obligations, to the entire economy. Credit crunch is a more specific term, and once again, we can use credit crisis or credit squeeze if we so choose. Simply put, liquidity can refer to anything from cash under the proverbial mattress to credit, or in other words, all types of credit can be considered liquidity types, but not the other way around. Which situation is more, let's say, dangerous? In light of liquidity being the broader term, we could say a liquidity crisis is worse. But only marginally so nowadays, in light of the fact that more and more consumers as well as businesses have become dangerously dependent on easily obtainable credit. The gap between them seems to be getting narrower and narrower as the global economy becomes increasingly addicted to credit.
Just watching that one, basically imagine rates being basically near zero. What are you going to do? Take out? Would you be encouraged to take out a loan where you could earn more on your borrowed money than you have to pay back? I mean, it's I don't even know what, economics 101, finance 101. Not sure, but yeah, if you have an economy that is very low, has very low rates, you might almost be encouraged to borrow to stimulate the economy, hence the monetary policy, I guess, is the main purpose of that. I didn't mean to cover that, but that video basically covers what a liquidity crisis is, explains it all, And that's the sort of environment we are in at the moment. Again, the rates are still increasing currently, but should the Fed stop, should they start to decrease, then you'll be in a potentially a deflationary environment, whereby we may see the inverted yield curve play out, whereby it may indicate recession. And also, as we can see, you and I know when we go to the petrol station, the pump, we're paying a lot more, paying for eggs, milk, bread, all that stuff, meat, veg or whatever, then you're paying a lot more. And you can feel the effects of the increases of the prices, and the economy is retracting by 2 months straight. So technically it's a recession, technically. And when the rates do start to get pulled out and the inverted yield curve happens again, prices start to decrease, the dollar starts to decrease, rates start to decrease. It's got to be really weird, because it might trigger, I'm not sure what it's going to trigger. Stonks, instead of pumping, they may not pump as hard. Crypto may not pump as hard either. But because we're in this unique position where quantitative easing and quantitative tightening was introduced, again, in a complex system, it's further variables to look at, which may have different outcomes than previously in markets. But at the moment, I would say we are very much so in a recession. Now, we have a potential solution for all of this. What could it be? You would want in, a normal economy, a normal yield curve or an inverted yield curve, you would want a high yielding asset that's low risk, that produces more of itself. Now, where have we, if you're a Hexagon, where have we heard this before? I guess there is the risk of price appreciation or depreciation, but for the long term, if you did hold long enough and it was to maintain its price, the yield may offset any of these potential losses. So for what I'm saying, say you bought in the top, when you had it staked for however many years, I think probably three, you'd get your amount of Hex back. You double it easily. And then it's like, well, if the price is down, how much have I really gained? Well, that's the calculation you have to take into account, and that's the risk. But yeah, for a high yield, low risk, because people went out chasing middlemen and they thought it was low risk. Turns out they got liquidated themselves, the middlemen, and you lost all your money. What's the use case for Bitcoin in this for a solution? You have what you don't buy, don't engage in that coin, or you hodl it and just hopefully it goes up in price. So if you bought Bitcoin near the top and held it till now, not only did you suffer price depreciation, and you didn't have the ability to stake, and you didn't have the ability to earn any yield. And okay, yes, the price may increase later in say 3 years' time, but it might surpass the all-time high for Bitcoin. But because you haven't been yielding anything, if that doesn't take place, then what have you really achieved? What if it's still less than the current all-time high? Just something to think about, people. In closing, I think we'll move on to more current geopolitical events. We've basically got the whole BlackRock Coinbase. So in an environment where you have assets that are prices that are decreasing, and you're hoping that in the future they increase, it might be a good time to buy, correct? So if you're a really large hedge fund, pretty sure they're a hedge fund, funds under management, yeah, they're a hedge fund. If you're a really large hedge fund, you might want to buy assets when they're really cheap. If the crypto market is at or near the all-time low for this cycle, then now might be the good time to make a move. And what did they do? They entered in, they partnered with Coinbase. So again, you can look into that, how that is exactly going to work. Some people have said they believe it's a good thing, basically legitimizing cryptocurrency. Now, I could further add to that, basically saying Coinbase is a middleman, and but it's a necessary evil at this point in time. Although you can buy cryptocurrencies directly through outlets like Simplex and the like. But for what it's worth, generally it's seen as a positive. But is Coinbase and BlackRock really what crypto was meant for? Time will tell. Funnily enough, I don't know if you remember during a live stream, Richard Hart did say, if you're not familiar, Richard Hart is the founder of Hex. Look into that, Pulse Chain, PulseX, etc. He did mention, he said maybe prices aren't going to go the way we think they're going to go. Maybe, I could be wrong, maybe he was alluding, similar to this analysis from Jim Rickard's analysis from independent research, that once the Fed decides to pull back the interest rates and starts lowering them, keeping them the same then lowering them, we might experience the price depreciation, the rates decrease. And when that takes place, what would happen? Well, at the moment we're seeing the crypto collapse causing a flooded market for Rolexes and Patek Phillip watches, like I didn't check the prices, but like high-end watches. So maybe people went out and sold all their crypto for Rolexes and Patek Phillip watches, and now they're like, shit, I need some capital, so you might be able to pick up some cheap watches. I'm pretty sure I saw a stream, there was some cheap watches as well. The amount was like, how many percent? But it was a little bit under the actual value of the watch, which was pretty cool. And in the future, that's hard to say, because in saying that, if we're forecasting or thinking that prices will decrease and rates will decrease and the amount of dollars will decrease, it's hard to say if that's a good buy or not. But anyway, that's another topic. I thought I would just like to point that out. Then, I guess, going back to the wilderness of mirrors, regarding cryptocurrency, we can see, the Richard Hart ecosphere. We've got the ability to stake and return average of 38%. If you round that up, it's 40% on a spreadsheet. If you were staked early, it's probably a lot more than that. If you stake for like 1 day, it's probably less than that. But you might want to check it out. Again, you can see here Pulse Chain being worked on, and within this ecosphere there is things being then built on top of that. So on top of the amazing finished product, which is hex.com, which is, as it says here, you can further research and find out there were things that were, if you're a staker class, you could get a free drop. If you're a staker class, you got another free drop, depending on how many t-shirts you had in both instances. If you wanted to, I think it was sacrifice some of the Hex tokens 1-for-1 for another token called Maxi, you could do that. There's a lot of great stuff going on within the Hexcan community. Again, you'd have to research that. that's probably separate and not what this video is for. What I will mention though is more recently we did have basically ICOSA HEDRON. Now HEDRON was built on top of Hex, and now there's, as I call it, the phase 2.0 or the finished version of HEDRON, basically with the ability to stake HEDRON, with the ability to stake ICOSA, with the ability to buy HSIs, which is in essence T-shares. You're staking your Hex for, it would make no sense logically to stake for anything less than 555 really, because you get the maximum amount of T-shares. You can then tokenize it or wrap it, turning it into an NFT. You can move it around to different wallets. You can also then believe it is sell them directly for ICOSA, which is, there's a whole mechanism behind that. And then also, if you wanted to, I think in the early stages, there is the another function whereby you can sacrifice, I think it's USD, pretty sure it's USDC or something like that. I'm not sure if there's any other ones. And you basically turn that into an NFT. So get the NFT, have the NFT sit there, and as it sits there, it accrues ICOSA. Basically, when you want, you can then burn the NFT, or you send the NFT around to other wallets, and then you basically would yield the amount of ICOSA. So depending on how the amount of ICOSA goes, that may or may not be profitable. It may be very profitable, who knows. Again, you can stake HEDRON for ICOSA. It's pretty amazing. It definitely lives up to its word. Decreased Hex sell pressure, decreased HEDRON sell pressure, increased Hex staking incentive, and increased HEDRON burning incentive. It'll like kickstart the mechanisms behind HEDRON that weren't working as efficiently with the first phase from my analysis. Now that is about it. Oh, and the reason I cover that is because this one here, this particular article here, yeah, you know, I'll put a link in the description below. That is, hopefully that helps someone. Hopefully stay to the end. I'll put the links in the description. And basically, that is how, in some cases, in almost all instances, a recession is picked up by most analysts through the inverted yield curve. That is sort of how you would identify a complex system when a whole is greater than the sum of its parts. I would definitely call HEDRON and ICOSA a complex system, basically built on top of Hex, which is another complex system, which is a part of crypto, which is built on top of Ethereum, which is another complex system, which is a part of the cryptocurrency space, taking into account Hart's law, which is another complex system whereby the liquidity pools are bounded to each other based on their trading pairs. And then taking into account the fiat pairs based on cryptocurrency and what fiat's paired with. And as we extend out, we can see that's how that's how complex systems can be analyzed. And how far and how deep you want to go with that probably depends on your computing power. No, I'm just kidding. That is it. Thank you. And I am signing out.